This is part 5 of our Microsoft tutorial dedicated to Microsoft Access database. In the previous part, number 4, we have designed a new form for users to use in order to create records, new records about clients. And we have discussed that if you switch into the form view on the tab design, then you will see pretty much the nuts and bolts of the form. In other words, what parts are there and how they're all linked together and how they work. So in this form, in this part, we're going to continue investigating and exploring Microsoft Forms. All right, what we just discussed is the users enter new data into the form and therefore into the database table. By interacting with these elements on the form, they are called controls. So far we have discussed two types of controls: labels that can be modified in a lot of different ways, and these controls, which are text boxes, they accept input from users. In other words, you can type into them. You cannot type inside the labels. Text boxes are not that modifiable. Well, they are modifiable, but you cannot change the name that's typed inside the text box because it will break the link, the connection between this text box and the field of the table. But you can still change how the text that is displayed inside the text box is shown to the users. So for example, right now I'm in the field in the text box client name. If I want, for example, client name to be displayed in bold and blue, all I have to do really is go to the Home tab. I'm right now, I'm working with the text box client name, or let's make it italic, just so that we, play around, have some fun. So I make the text italic, and I also change the color to be, this one, what's it called? Navy blue or dark blue or something like that. Okay, and let's make it bold, for example. Let's see what changes does that have on the form. So we go to the form view, and you can immediately see that ABC LLC, the name of my client number 1, is displayed in italicized, apparently bold, and also color blue. So in other words, you cannot change this name that's typed inside the text box, but everything else is changeable. Let's actually take a look at the client ID just to illustrate a couple of more properties. So every control, be it label or text box or any other control from this group that we can place on the form, has a bunch of properties, and you can see them right here. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of them, obviously, because the list is very long. I'm going to just illustrate a couple of them. So right now, for example, I'm going to switch to form view, and immediately when I switch to the form view, you can see that my focus of the input is placed inside this text box client ID. The cursor is there, right? I can highlight this number 1 as if Microsoft Access invites me to go ahead and edit what's inside this field. But probably I know nothing is going to happen because this is an alphanumeric field, and therefore Access does not allow me to modify it. So if I try to type anything, Microsoft says no, can do. All right, but as far as the user is concerned, this can be misleading, right? So if I'm not familiar with this program, I see it for the first time, I open it up and the first field is highlighted, I may mistakenly believe that this field is modifiable and editable. So the role of the form designer is to make the user input seamless and intuitive, so that users, whenever possible, whenever it's pretty much understandable what this field does, we will restrict what the users can do with this field in order for them to not even double guess if they're doing things right or not. So what I'm going to do is switch back to the design view, and right now I'm editing client ID text box, right? So I'll change a couple of things about this text box. Well, number 1 is, well, first let me illustrate how I can appear or disappear something. Okay, so there is a property that's named visible. So right now this text box is visible. Visible, yes. What happens if I change it to no? And then I switch back to the form view. You can see that the client ID disappeared in the form view, right? So it's as if nothing is there. I can't click, I can't see anything, but if I switch to the design view, it's actually still on the form. So this is pretty much a way how programmers or form designers can hide or show some controls. Sometimes it's required for programming purposes, like for example, if I want to keep something that users typed, but I don't want to show that on the screen, in order not to confuse them, I may make the control to be invisible. So the control is there, it's just not showing. Okay, let's see. There is another. Let's show them all. There is another property which is called enabled. I'm trying to find it here. Enabled. Okay, enabled. Enabled right now is set to yes. Let's see what happens if I set it to no. So it's still visible on the form, right? I'm just going to disable the control itself. So let's switch back to the form view. Oh, I didn't enable. I did not make the control visible. Sorry. So I'm going to make it visible yes. Forgot to do that. And so visible yes, and I have to find enabled right now, right there. So I set the enable to no. Now let's switch to the form view, and you can see that what happened to the client ID text box, it's kind of grayed out, okay? And also you see that the focus of input right now is placed into the text box client name. So I cannot even click inside this text box, okay? So that's what enabled or disabled control means. Right now control is disabled, but it's still kind of showing the grayish field. So what can I do in order to make it disappear? Essentially what I can do is make sure that this gray background does not show up, and this rectangle, which is apparently the border of my control, also doesn't show up. So let me show you how that is done. So I'm going to switch back to the design view, and right next door to the right under the property enabled, I have a property that says locked. Locked right now says no, so I'm going to say yes. The control is locked for editing or any interaction. So what happens if I switch back to the form view? Well, the gray background disappeared, right? I cannot click anywhere, but I still can see this gray rectangle around one. So this is pretty much the borders, the boundaries of my text box control. So I can make them actually disappear too. So let's switch back to the design view, and I'm sure I can find it somewhere here on the list, but it's easier actually to go and see on the format tab. So that would be border, right? Everything that how the border looks deals with the properties that start with border. I have border style, border width, so I can make the border look thicker or thinner, and I can change the border color. So let's take a look at the border style. Border style, I can see that there are a lot of different things that I can do. Right now it's set solid, but it can be made transparent. Transparent means you pretty much can see through that, right? It becomes invisible. Well, let's see if that worked. So I switch back to the form view, and there you go. So client ID now, control is disabled. I can click that, can click inside of that, right? And also I made the borders disappear. So this part is uneditable, non-editable for the users, okay? So that's what I mean by modifying the controls and making them different, so that when user comes to the form, even if they were not trained to use that this form, but it's pretty obvious by looking at this one that client ID number 1 is here just for informational purposes. You cannot click on that, you cannot change that. All you have to do is, modify. You can modify anything else, but not this one. Okay, so the work of form designers, or this is what we call GUI, right? Graphical User Interface. Users interact with the program by clicking in different fields, using navigational buttons like this one, going backwards and forwards between the records, typing new values. So the work of the graphical designers is to make sure that users can use these forms in a very straightforward way, and it's intuitive for them what happens. Okay. So let's switch back and explore some more controls. Well, first of all, this weird object at the very bottom. If I click on that object and activate that, you can see that the object has the type subform. Actually, in the next part of this video, we're going to deal with subform, a lot. But subform is a form in and of itself. So in this case, I can see that this subform shows me information that it picks up from the table work completed. Well, let's take a look. So for example, right now I have client number 1, right? And according to this subform, for client number 1, I have 2 records. Employee number 1 did some work on September 12, 2016, database design for 8 hours. And also employee number 2, same day, contract negotiation for 5.5 hours. If I click on the next client, so use these navigation buttons at the bottom, I click and go to the next client number 2, there is only 1 record, and it's September the 12th, 2016, employee number 2 did initial interview for 4 hours. If I click to the next client, if you remember, I created that client from blank, pretty much I entered that in the previous part of these videos. I didn't have any work, I didn't enter any work done by any of my employees for that client. So therefore this subform doesn't show anything really. Okay. So in other words, what happens is you can see that when I created this form using just one click of a button, correct? So what happened is I selected my table clients and just clicked on the button form, and that was created for me. So in other words, what Microsoft Access did is it placed a form essentially inside another form. That's why it's called subform, right? And these 2 forms are linked. So when I select the client on the main form, the client ID is communicated to the subform, and it says, well, user right now is looking at the client ID number 1. So right here, please show me all the records that relate to the client number 1 from the table work completed. And that's why it's showing me all the details on the tab design. If I go back to the form view, that's why it's showing me all the records that are related to the client number 1. When I switch the client, all the records that are related to the client number 2, etc., etc. Well, since I'm the owner and designer, I'm right now trying different things. Let me do this. Let me just go ahead and erase this table. So I don't want to see that, in other words, right? Every time when I navigate through my clients, all I want to see is this part, client information. And by the way, this tool that we just created, the form, you saw that it allows me to enter new clients, right? In the previous part of this videos, part number 4, I just created by typing in this fields client number 3, Quarte LLC. It also allows me to edit the records that are already there. For example, let's say that this client, Quarte LLC, just moved from 31 2nd Street to 41 3rd Street. They changed their address. Okay. So if I move to the next record from the previous record, it all clears up because I don't have record number 4. But let's take a look at the table clients. So double click on the table, and you can see that my client number 3, Quarte LLC, right now is at 41 3rd Street. So in other words, I'm going to close this one. In other words, and I go back to the record number 3, I can use forms for entering new clients, for editing the existing clients, and also I can delete the clients as well. So for example, right here on the tab home, in the group of buttons called records, I have this button that says delete. So I'm going to delete a record. Microsoft Access warns me, you're about to delete one record. If you click yes, you won't be able to undo this operation, so be careful. Are you sure? Yes. And when I click yes, nothing happens visually, right? But let's see what happened to the table clients. In the table clients, there is no more record number 3. I just erased it, okay? So, in other words, that is how users are gaining access to the information recorded inside tables. They do not access tables directly by opening the table and start typing away the new information. Users are restricted from direct access from tables in any information system. They do their input through the use of user forms. Okay, let's actually try to delete. Let's see if it works. Here's my client number 2. Let's say I want to delete record about client number 2. If I try to do that, Microsoft says the record cannot be deleted or changed because table work completed includes related records. Guess what? This is your referential integrity in action. Remember, we discussed referential integrity in part 3. Referential integrity means that so this warning right there says that if you delete client number 2, there are some other records that point to client number 2, and therefore you cannot delete client number 2. That's referential integrity that prohibits you from doing that. Table work completed. If I open that up, there is one record right here that has client number 2. So if I delete client number 2 from table clients, this record will point nowhere. And referential integrity therefore stops you from doing so. So I hope that basically makes a connection or explains a little bit more how referential integrity works. Let's switch back to the design view. Let's investigate what else do we have in terms of controls. So we're familiar right now with 2 types of controls, right? There are labels and there are text boxes. Labels just for show and tell purposes. You can edit, modify them in any way you want. Text boxes are there to accept the input from users and save it into the database. So here is my text box. So I can add new text box if I want to. And here's my control label. What else is out there? Buttons. So this is a control button. And how you can tell? If you hover your mouse over the control, you can see there is a tooltip or little help box that shows up shortly after you stop. So this is a tab control. Just like this, right? You click on different tabs, you see different content. This is a hyperlink control. In other words, you can put links to web pages on your form. This is probably image control. No, it's a browser, sorry. So in other words, you can click on the link and it will open up in the form. Then there should be an image control somewhere here. That's what it is. No, one of them is image. Well, there are check boxes. There are radio buttons, just like this one, or they're also called option buttons, and there are combos. Combos actually we're going to use in the next part of these videos, but in this part what I wanted to do is show you how the buttons work. So for example, let me just reproduce the same functionality as I have right here. Okay, so in the form view I can navigate between the records, right? At the bottom I have navigational buttons. So let me switch to the design view, and I'll try to put a button that will move me forward to the next record. So I'm going to click on this control right there in my ribbon, and I'm going to place it on the form somewhere in the space. Okay, so it created a button for me, and I can see that buttons can do certain operations. So for example, record navigation or record operation or form operation. So let's just be simplistic, record navigation. And you can see that for record navigation I can find next, I can find a specific record, or I can go to the first, to the last, go to the next, and go to the previous. Well, let's go to the next record, okay? So I'm going to click next here. Text, in other words, right now what's showing up is command 26, whatever that means. I can replace it with the text, and the text will read next record. Alright, and this control is going to be called command 26. That's fine by me. Alright, so I just created the button, right? And it has the capture that says next record. I'm going to move that in the button a little bit so that it looks beautiful. Well, didn't quite look as glamorous as I hoped. Let's see if that works on the form view. And on the form view it looks better, right? Okay, so what this record does is, if I click on the record, it shows the next record for me, right? But I don't have, if I click one more time, it will show next record, which does not exist really. So it shows me the blank record. So let me do the same thing. I will create a button that will navigate not to the next record, but to the previous record. So I'm going to click on the button again, place this button right here on the form, and do the same thing, record navigation, but instead of next, go to the previous. Okay, click next. And I want to show text which says previous record. That's fine. Next, and button is going to be named for internal purposes command 27. So finish that. I can resize it, obviously, right? No, not as obvious actually. So if I now move to the form view, these two buttons I can use to navigate back and forth. So right now I'm looking at record number 1. Click, right, that's record number 2. Click, that's new record number 3. And then I can go backwards to record number 2, record number 1. So this is just an example to illustrate how I can use the controls buttons and what can they do. All right. So this is the end of our part number 5, and in the next part number 6 we will create even more complicated form with using and we're going to use combo boxes for that. Okay, so I'm going to stop here.